is Ato Quayson, Professor of English and Director of the Center for Diaspora and Transnational Studies. I have two questions. One, budgetary, and one to do with interdisciplinary and area studies at the University of Toronto. In terms of the budget, I think we will all agree that when you say that the status quo is not sustainable, we all agree that the budgetary crisis has to be dealt with. You mentioned today, you've mentioned in all your memos, that there are some $23 million a year that's of deficit that needs to be dealt with. But you've also mentioned, in response to various questions, that the savings from these proposed mergers and acquisitions might not amount to, and I'm being generous here, perhaps $3 million, which means that there will be at least another $90 million per year that will have to be dealt with. I would welcome some comments on how you propose to tackle the $19 million on top of whatever you propose to save, since the status quo is not sustainable. But related to that, I'm assuming, and you must correct me if I'm wrong, that tackling the extra 19 million plus cannot be done suddenly. Because if we do anything sudden, as we have seen from these proposals for mergers and acquisitions, there will be various kinds of dislocations in the system. And if we are not going to do anything sudden to address that budgetary deficit, any gradualist approach that you might adopt, I would welcome your comments on why such a gradualist approach could not have been used to tackle all the 22 million instead of creating an emergency room situation which will not tackle the entire budget. Because what I'm asking, if a gradualist approach is required for dealing with the extra 19 million, why would that same gradualist approach not be used to tackle the entire sum instead of trying to create problems which does not tackle the budget? The second set of comments and questions I want to ask has to do with the status of interdisciplinary programming at the University of Toronto. Since coming here some 5 or so years ago, I've heard many times that the units such as the African Studies program, Caribbean Studies, and South Asian Studies have been suboptimal in terms of funding, at the very least. Now, these units, of course, are area studies programs. But considering the fact that in the current academic plan, there has been a direct attack on East Asian studies, diaspora and transnational studies, Latin American studies, I would welcome some reflections from you on whether this does not signal that the University of Toronto perhaps either does not care enough about area studies and interdisciplinary programs, or is not that is not sure of what to do with them. And so at the first sign of financial exigency, those are the first things that they want to cut. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ato. Wonderful questions. So the $22 million question, if I may call it that, sure. And this actually speaks to your point about a gradualist approach. So we have been working on a budget strategy for at least 3 years, where, as I mentioned, we've had base and OTO cuts in the first year and the second year, although they were a little bit smaller base cuts the second year, and then OTO cuts in the third year. Pardon me, OTO is one time only. Sorry, it's easy for us to lapse into jargon and acronyms. But also the primary methods for trying to improve the revenue flow to the faculty to enable us to both address this structural deficit and enhance quality of undergraduate education. So I talked about the fact that we were slowing down plans to shrink undergraduate domestic enrollment, and so that has a beneficial impact on our revenues. Secondly, that we are and have been quite successfully growing international undergraduate enrollment. So we started at around 11 or would put us on par with universities like McGill, for example, or UBC, where the international component is considerably higher. And there seems to be huge demand for this. Why does that help our revenues? Because tuition fees for international students are less tightly regulated, simply put. While it's true that we don't get provincial grant for those students, that is more than offset by the tuition fees that we receive from them. And then the third measure was indeed moving from the per course fee to the program fee or flat fee, which is the third of the measures. So those three moves, and we've also been working on beefing up summer teaching to try and make more efficient use of the capacity that we have in the summer, with some success, collaborating with the School of Continuing Studies, and doing a few other things, are designed to do more of the heavy lifting in terms of repairing the financial position of the faculty. So perhaps not all of that 22 million, but a big chunk of it is likely to be addressed through those means. But as I said in my presentation, I'm not sure, perhaps I went through it a little fast. To do so doesn't give us much room to do much else. It doesn't give us much room to make new appointments. And it doesn't give us a lot of room to do all those other things that we're trying to do to enrich undergraduate and graduate education. And so that's why we're looking at these other ways of redeploying resources. Just to give you a sense of what $1 million could do at the margin. Again, remember, 84% of our budget, something like that, is salaries and benefits. There's not a lot of extra room to do other things. But $1 million, which may not sound like a lot to you, it would allow us to increase the number of international course modules from 7 to 42. We could increase the number of students participating in that wonderful experience from 90 to about 540. And, I could translate it into a number of other very tangible ways of helping people understand a lot of the wonderful things we could do. We could put 2 new staff in every college registrar office and still have money left over with $1 million. So at the margin, figures of that scale can make a huge difference to the quality of life of our students and our staff. On the question of interdisciplinarity, this is, let me just say this. First of all, we understand very well, and I feel this in my gut, that very often the most innovative insights for important questions arise when you bring scholars together from across various different disciplines, and I don't for a minute want to be understood as claiming that interdisciplinarity is unimportant. We have a lot of interdisciplinary centers and institutes in arts and science. Some of them have achieved status of departments effectively, like comparative literature, like medieval studies. Many of these would continue, and indeed we will continue to find ways to create and support and enhance and facilitate that kind of interdisciplinary interaction.